Warning: this book review may contain millennial rants. Proceed with caution. Nights of Rain and Stars by Maeve Binchy follows four strangers, each running away from their lives. They end up on a beautiful Greek island where they form a strong friendship with each other and the island's residents. As they bond over their shared attempts to escape their past, they realise they may have been running the wrong way. This is a feel-good novel. It's what I would call emotional chick lit, which Maeve Binchy seems to be quite infamous for. And I actually heard about her first because my mum likes her work. And as my mum is a discerning reader and I hold her opinion in the highest regards, I expected this book to be a work of art. And it was okay. It's a simple book with a nice, gentle story, which relies more on conversation and character than description and action. And I think it does a good job of telling the story it wants to tell in this simple manner. Stories don't need to be complex to be good, they just need to say something, and this one certainly does. Despite the lack of description, the book still manages to maintain a strong sense of place through things such as the clothes, the food, the weather, and what details we are given about the beaches and the seas on the island. It feels very rustic and earthy, which matches the themes of running away from something to rediscover a simpler way of being. The book begins with a terrible tragedy. A tourist boat catches fire and sinks, resulting in the deaths of 24 people. It brings our main cast together as they end up witnessing it and bond initially through talking about it. I really like how this book doesn't forget about the tragedy after the first chapter and how its effects echo through the rest of the story, to the funeral, the grieving residents of the village, and the aftermath. It feels more than just an inciting incident, and provides a somber backdrop which forces the main characters to compare and confront their own issues. I also really appreciate the book's attempts to tackle difficult themes such as abusive relationships, broken marriages, and more prominently, the separation of parent and child. I think it looks at these issues in a mature and gentle manner, cutting out a lot of the drama to focus on the emotional centre of each character's situation. And I also really like the main characters. I like how different they all are, despite being similar ages, and I like the chemistry between them all. There was something almost whimsical about it, the easy friendship, the beautiful setting, their frequent lunches at the restaurant with the blue tablecloth. They're all very charming, and even though they make stupid decisions throughout, I never disliked them because of it. The prose is quite basic. Most notably during long exchanges of dialogue. He said truthfully, he looked sad, she tried to defend him, are all dialogue tags or bits of description between lines, and I found them rather lacking. I suppose the issues are A, telling rather than showing. Like, don't tell me he's sad, show me him frowning or slumping his shoulders or his downcast eyes. And B, telling us the obvious. We know she's defending him because her dialogue was defending him. We didn't need to be told that's what she was doing. It is a tricky piece of writing to manoeuvre though, as you don't want to just have dialogue, but sometimes it can be difficult to insert physical action because people don't necessarily do that much whilst talking. I would recommend reading this quote, as it's great. The dialogue seems a little odd at times. I struggled a lot trying to explain why it sounds odd, and the best explanation I can come up with is that it sounds too formal or neat or smart at times. Not that the characters are idiots, but there were words like truly and darling and the such, which I would say most people in their 20s don't tend to use in everyday conversation. And it just didn't sound right all of the time. Lastly, the character Vonnie rubbed me the wrong way. She's a middle-aged lady that moved to the Greek island from Ireland several years before the main cast turn up. And as the book progresses, we learn more about her past, and of course, the problems she went through are echoed in the main character's current struggles, which allows them to make decisions, which is fine. But she also tells them what to do fairly early on, and whilst her advice is generally good and comes from a place of experience, it still irked me. At first I thought this was because she is very harsh, a practitioner of tough love, which is a technique that does not necessarily work for everyone. And yes, I realised later in the book that she is meant to be flawed as well, so being upset that she isn't perfect isn't fair for criticism. In fact, she does realise that telling characters what to do even if they don't want to hear it, and instead being a little gentler and letting them realise their mistakes by themselves works better, as this is what allows one character to finally make the correct decision. But I realised about a week after finishing this book that my problem is actually slightly projected. You see, she is still painted as an authority figure whose advice comes across as objectively correct, and is, of course, followed by the end by all the characters, even if one piece of advice leads to one character being miserable and feeling as though their life is over, which is a downer. And this irritates me because it really reminds me of the way my generation is spoken to by the previous generation. All of the characters are in their 20s, I think one maybe in the early 30s. Then there's Vonnie, who's like 50 or 60, and whilst, yes, she has been through a lot and has experienced a lot of the similar issues, it doesn't take into account how the world has changed and how that advice might therefore not be completely correct. In the same vein, people my age are always being given advice from people older and it doesn't necessarily make sense anymore. The obvious example being the job market, the amount of times people have told me just to walk in with a CV, or if you've applied and heard nothing, give them a ring and ask, it shows initiative. Which, yeah, might have worked 30 years ago, but not anymore. You walk into a shop with a CV, it'll end up in the bin, or filed away and forgotten about. You phone to ask about an application, you'll be blacklisted for not following instructions, and for being pushy. Just because someone is young and inexperienced doesn't mean they automatically know less than someone older. Basically, I would have preferred the characters to have come to the decisions themselves, based on Vonnie's backstory, rather than all the drama of her telling them what to do, them moping because they don't want to, and eventually realising she was right. I would have liked them to have realised it themselves. Overall, it's a nice enough book, and good for those who like an emotional read. Despite all the negatives I had, I still did really like it and enjoy reading it. Just be aware that if you are thinking about reading it, it does go into some pretty nasty things, which may be upsetting for some. But it's an easy read, and is sure to make you want to visit Greece and yearn for a simpler way of life. That's it. That's all I've got to say. Bye.